Hey, what's up everyone? It's Bryant, the Flowhawk here. Today's video, I'm going to talk all about environment variables, specifically in managed solutions. So the idea behind an environment variable is I can have one value in one environment and change that value as I move a solution between environments. There's some things that you need to know, some gotchas, and some ways that I've had to struggle to see how to update these things and change as we go. And I'm going to share those with you today so that you don't have to go through the same struggles that I did. Let me share my screen and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so here we are in an environment here. I've got a dev environment called Flowhawk Dev. It's a sandbox. But in here, I'm just going to create a new solution. Flowhawk environment variables. Always do a new publisher. That way you can easily group together the things that come from different solutions. Let's call it environment variables. Prefix here. Obviously, I would fill this thing out a little bit more and put my own contact information there as well. But we'll save that. Okay, and then add it here as the publisher. So we're going to create this solution. Now, if you don't know what solutions are, go check it out online. The solution is essentially a package of apps and flows. We'll see here today, we're also going to include environment variables as a part of that solution. So in my solution, I don't have anything quite yet. First thing I'm going to do is create a new environment variable. The first one we're going to give it here is URL. So a common scenario is that let's say I'm sending emails out that point to a specific site or Power Apps portal or Dataverse or something. And as I go through, I want this to change where I'm pointing in my dev to where I'm pointing in my test and then my prod. That's a common scenario here. And then for type, we're just going to choose text. Okay, you can give it a default value, but what I found as I go through here is that the best option would be to not give it a default value. You could give it a current value. So let's say that in dev here, we want to point to Google. Okay. Perfect. So we've got now this environment variable. If I click on it, you'll see that it shows it, gives me the current value. Perfect. Now let's make a flow. I want to show you something that you'll probably run into when using environment variables in a managed solution. So I'm going to do a simple flow. Trigger is going to be to push a button, no inputs, and all we're going to do is use a compose statement. All right, and what we're going to do in the dynamic content area, you'll see here that now Power Automate's got this section called environment variables. Very easy to pull that environment variable in right from that table. So save that. This is going to be our simple flow. Push a button, show me the environment variable value. All right, we'll test it as soon as we're ready here and see what that value is currently for the environment variable. All right, and if we look at the compose, we'll see that that value is google.com just as we set it. Perfect. So now I'm going to close this tab, hit done over here. You'll see this flow now appears right there. So we're going to now move this into a new environment. Okay, the way you do that is up at the top, export. You should always publish changes if you want to bring the latest changes over to the new environment. And then check for issues is also something that you should do on a regular basis. In this case, I'm not going to just for the sake of the video. I always check for issues before I move something to an environment. So next, make sure you see the current version. You'll notice here we're going to do a managed solution. What that means is that we can't make any changes in the future environments. The point of a managed solution is that we only make the changes in our development environment, and then we move that between development and the test environment, and then no one makes changes in test. We find something wrong in test, we go back to development, fix it, export a new solution, move it to test. Now that I've got that, it's currently exporting. What I want to do is come here, we'll go back to the same maker portal. I'm going to show you where that environment variable lives. Okay, this is going to be critical to understanding what's happening. Let me make sure I'm back in my dev environment. And if I go to data and to tables, this is my Dataverse. You see here we've got that exported. In fact, since we're going to have to wait for it as well, I'm going to now move it into my production environment. I'm going to do it here in the default environment. Normally you'd have a dedicated production environment. And I'll just import this. Browse, find it here. Next. And you'll notice here, got some settings. I'm just going to leave it all as is and hit import. All right. And I'm intentionally showing you here that it did not ask me for a new value for that environment variable. I'll show you why. So we're back in this dev while we're waiting for that to import. Under tables, it always will filter you to default. Click all to show every table there is, and you can search for the word environment. I'm going to show you two tables here, one called definition and one called value. If I open up the definition table and go to data, it's going to show me that I have two environment variables. This one is by default, always there. Here's the one that I created, the URL. Okay, I can edit this record, and I believe it has a field to link it to the value table. So this is the definition where we set up the name of it, and it gives it a unique ID. And then here's the value for that environment variable. And I can double click that. That should open up the values table and show me that for this environment variable, I'm giving it this value. Okay, so important for us to know that this is the table in the Dataverse. And every time we create a new environment variable, it's a new record. That's actually two tables, right? Definition, value. We're going to create a new record in the definition and a new record in the value. So that's key to keep in mind. Now let's go see. Looks like it imported correctly. We come in here and open it. All right, and it's a managed solution. So again, it's locked. I should not be able to change these values. If I click the URL here, I see that I've got a locked value here for current value. I can't change that value. So you think of yourself like, what was the point then of creating an environment variable if I can't change the value between environments? Here's something that you'll run into. It's pretty sticky here. So I'm just going to delete this solution. At this point, there's no recovering that value for me. There are ways around it. I'll show you. But when you're doing it for the very, very first time, best way to go about it is to just delete the solution. Re-import it in this way. So we'll come back to our dev environment while that's deleting. And what I'm going to do is go back to the solution. And before I export, I'm going to click on my environment variable, click the three dots, and remove from the solution. You'll notice here, it says remove this value before exporting if it shouldn't be used in other environments. It's unfortunate, but every time that we, looks like I downloaded a new one. Every time that we move a solution from environment, from dev to, let's say, test, prod, UAT, whatever process we go through in our application lifecycle management, we have to remove the value from the solution. So if I click delete from this environment, it's going to delete this value, and then I'll have to actually recreate it. Easiest way is to click remove from the solution, and then it currently doesn't have a value. Now I can export this. As I go to export, I'll publish the latest changes again. Make sure that everything I've done is going to be included in the solution. And then click next. Make sure it's that new version number, and we're set as managed, and hit export. This will prepare it, download it again. We'll move it into the new environment. All right, now if we come to the new environment, since we're waiting for a second, I come to tables, and this is our default environment. This is what we're treating as our test or prod environment. I click all on the rows, search for environment. Let's take a look and see if by deleting that solution, did it actually delete the environment variable itself? And you see here that it did. Since the environment variable was in the solution, deleting that solution deleted the environment variable. Good thing to know. Looks like it's still exporting here. Waiting for that _2 come up. There we go. There it is. Moving over to the new environment, solutions, import. Now I browse, find that new solution. Hit next. We see that all looks good. Hit next. And here's what we're looking for. The very first time we move it between environments, it asks me what the new value should be for this. Now it's only going to do this once. So if I come here and I say, well, it was Google in the dev environment, but we're going to use Bing in the test environment. We're going to import that. Now that value is being set up in this Dataverse to be the new value. Okay. So if I come back here now, since I've exported that, I still need to work in my dev environment, open up that environment variable, and what you'll come down and see this plus add existing. If I click that, it's actually going to go find the value I had just removed from the solution and bring it back in. That way, I don't have to keep track of it. It's going to remove it temporarily, bring it back in, and then I can hit save. And that's set up the way it should be. All right, now coming back here, currently importing. See how long this takes. Shouldn't take very long. Simple solution here. All right, but at the same time, I want to show you what happens if I forget to export this environment variable as empty after doing it the first time. All right, so what I'm going to do now is in this environment, I am now going to export the solution again, but this time we're bringing with it the dev environment variable value. Okay, it's something that I've done many times by accident. I want to show you exactly what happens when you go through this process as well. Okay, new solution version number, still as a managed solution. We're going to export this. Coming over here, looks like it imported correctly. Now, if I open it up and look at the URL here, it doesn't have a value listed. Instead, I come to the tables again, and I'm in my new environment, test or production or whatever you want to call it. And if I open up that environment variable value table, data, you'll see I've got this new one here for Bing.com. If I click edit record, you'll see it's the URL environment variable that now has this new value of Bing.com. So that's how you would do it every time you go to a new environment. Okay, remove the value from the dev environment, so there's no default and no current value. Move it in, it will prompt you during import for the new value, and then it will create that for you. Okay, if I come, I'm still in my new environment, and I run that flow. Okay, let's run. See what value it gives me. Open up that run, see what it is, and it gets me Bing.com, as you might expect. Okay, so what happens now if I've forgotten to take out the value from dev when I bring it over to test? Remember, we've already brought it in once this way. And if it's the very first time, my recommendation is to delete the solution and then go remove the values and bring it in. If it's not the first time, let me show you what happens. So import, going to find the new solution, 003. Next, import. Okay. In my experience here, we're going to see an error and it's not going to import. It's going to tell us that the environment variables already have a value. Let's give it a second to see if that's actually the case. Now I want to, for this next piece, how can I then update in my test environment or my production environment, the one that has a managed solution? Since I can't go and add a new value, let's say that I did Bing.com in my test environment, and it turns out that I actually didn't want Bing. I wanted that at first at the time, but now I'm, far into this project. Turns out the requirements have changed. I'm not going to use Bing.com. I need to change it to, Twitter. All right, Twitter is where we're going to refer people to for this particular environment variable. You see here it failed. If I download the log, it says it's going to block the download for me. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's keep and open it. Take a look at this log. And I think I shared my window and not my screen, so you probably can't see that. But all it's telling me is that my environment variable already has a value. Okay, so that's not going to work for us. That's the error you'll see if you forget to remove that value when you're bringing it over. Okay, so now back to that scenario. I'm going to come to tables. This is how you'll modify the variable value. Okay, so if I come and I search for environment, I'm in that Dataverse piece under tables here. I can come to the value under data and find it here. I have two options at this point. If I edit this record, I can actually change the value here. So if I change it here to twitter.com, I can do that from the Dataverse table only. Okay, and if I refresh the data, you'll see that new value is here. Now check this out, because this, to me, was so crazy. If I come and I now run this flow, and I look at what value it pulls out for that environment variable, it pulled out the value that doesn't exist in that table anymore. Isn't that crazy? No matter what you do, it caches that environment variable value, and it will not point to anything else. I could import a new solution. It will not update the value of this variable, even though I went and changed it in the table. In fact, when I was doing some exploration, when I came to the Microsoft documentation for environment variables, I found this one line right here. When environment variable values are changed directly within an environment instead of through an ALM operation like solution import, flows will continue using the previous value until the flow is either saved or turned off and turned on again. Okay, you can't save the flow in a managed solution, or it'll create a solution layer. Don't need to go through that. But what I can do, that documentation says I can turn it off and turn it back on again. So if I've manually modified that value in the table to something else, I can come to the flows that reference that value, turn them off, and turn them back on again. Okay, that's something I can do in a managed solution. And if I click here and see solution layers, doing that process did not create a new solution layer for me, so I'm good. It's still looking at the managed solution as the first layer. So now if I open up this flow and I run it, let's just make sure that value has been updated now. If I look and see what it is, it now says Twitter. Okay, this is something that will boggle your mind and send you down the rabbit hole of Google searches to try to find out what in the world is happening. It caches your environment variable value until you turn this off and back on again. Even if I brought a new solution in, it would not have re-updated to the new value. Isn't that crazy? Now here's your second option. If you don't want to update it and then turn it off and on every flow, let's say you had 10, 15 flows in here that all had that value. You don't want to go through one by one, turn them off, turn them on again, and risk not accidentally turning one back on again. Here's something else that you can do. So I'm in my test environment. I go back to the tables, and I'm again looking for that environment variable value table. Go to data. I find this record, and I delete it. Okay, boom, it's gone. Now my test environment has no value for that environment variable. Okay, so now let me come back to dev. Let's remove that value from the solution. Okay, it's been saved. Perfect. And let's export a new one. Publish the changes. Okay. Export it as a managed solution. It increments the version number. And here we are exporting that solution. So now come back to the new one. again, we've deleted this value. If I go to the solution, it's angry at me. It's angry at me. And every person who's in this environment will see that there's an environment variable that is missing a value. So make sure that you do this fairly quickly if that's the route you want to go with the deletion. And here, if I open up, it tells me, and if I click the URL, there's no default value. Here's the solution that's been downloaded for me. It will let me go directly to it and update it here. But let me instead import this solution again. Got 004, import, next, and here we go, it prompts it there. So a couple different options. My recommendation, if you're using environment variables, never let the environment variable have a default or current value on your very first import to a new environment. Don't do it. That way it'll always prompt you the very first time for this value. Now, if you get down the road and you want to change the value in a managed solution, you have a couple different options. Number one, go to the Dataverse table, look for the environment variable value table, find the value you want to change, update that value, then go back in your solution, turn off and on every flow that references that value. That'll reset the cache in the flows. And that should set you up good. If you don't want to go that route, your second option would be go to the environment variable value table, say that 3 times fast, delete the record, and then either import a new solution, which will prompt this window, or click see environment variable value and enter it in the prompt here. Okay, so if I come here now and enter, let's go to espn.com, because I'm there all the time. So save that. It now gets rid of the error. Let's go run our flow and see what happens. Take a look. And it's got Twitter. So even if we use the banner at the top, which I was curious about, we just proved it wrong. So even if I use the banner at the top to add a new value, not going to work. But if I use the new solution, all right, so let's go back to the table now. I've got to delete ESPN off of there. Delete this record. It's crazy to me. Okay, we're going to import that 004. It's going to prompt me for the new value here. Here's where I'm going to put something different, all right? Let's go to office.com. Okay, and during import, it will add the variable value back to the table. The tables, variable value, data. Okay, this is where that value is going to come in. But you get it. We'll wait for this to happen. I just want to reaffirm, and here it is. There's the new value. It's tricky. And if you don't know these little tricky pieces of it, you're going to get stuck. So in a managed solution, it is possible to update these variables as you move forward. You just have to know these little things. So hopefully this is helpful to anybody. And if you're stuck, reach out in the forums. Folks are happy to help. This is just what I learned from my own experience. Hopefully it helps you along the journey with yours. All right, have a good one.